Kia ora koutou katoa, and welcome today to the latest of Sustainable Business Network's weekly shout-out series, which is a chance for a couple of our members to talk to you and tell you about their business. My name is Phil Jones. I'm going to be the MC today. So we have about half an hour or so to hear from Henrik and Ben about their businesses. I'm the work in the projects team at Sustainable Business Network. Within our projects work, two of our focus areas are circular economy and climate, and both are relevant to today's conversation. I particularly focus on our climate work. So just a bit of background before we hear from Ben and Henrik. We obviously have a climate crisis. We have growing greenhouse gas emissions, and transport sector is the main sector that's growing the most. Our emissions have doubled since 1990. In 1990, only 12% of our overall emissions were from transport. It's now nearer 20%. We've got a major problem there. In terms of our vehicles, we in New Zealand, we have very high car ownership rates. Basically, for every adult, we have a car. So we have 4 million vehicles, one of the highest ownership rates in the world. And the other thing about them is we've got a lot of them, but actually for most of the time, they're not being used. So for 95% of the time, a typical car is not used. So we've got an underutilization problem there as well. So both of those issues we'll be covering today through the presentations and the conversation. Before we start, just like to, related to that, we've just got a couple of quick questions we thought we'd ask you to answer. So the first one should be popping up on the screen soon. Yeah, just to get an idea as to how many cars are in your household. I see we don't have none there, which is not great. So sorry about that. If you haven't got a car in your household. Yes, indeed, Ben. Are those coming up on the results coming up available? There we go. So most only have one car, which is quite unusual in New Zealand, or certainly in Auckland. So the next one to come up is coming up soon. Yes, have you ever used a car share service of any description? Obviously the topic of today's conversation. How are we going there? Are they all coming in? Ah, excellent. We've got an audience which is 3/4 have actually used a car share service. That's great. That's really cool. Okay, so moving swiftly on. Thank you very much for telling us about that. Sorry about the lack of the none on the first one there. So first, I'll introduce Henrik Stovring from MyCarYourRental, which is a peer-to-peer car share service. So Henrik, over to you.
Thanks so much for the introduction, and thanks for having me present here. So it's really, really great. Yeah, as mentioned by you, I operate MyCarYourRental, which is a peer-to-peer car sharing platform. Most of you probably heard of Airbnb. Pretty much works the same way, Airbnb for cars. So if you are one of those households with just one car or no cars that we couldn't see in the question earlier, then it's definitely a place to go to find a car when you need it. Or if you're one of the households that got 2, 3, 4, or even 10 cars, as some households has, then we're the place to go to, because yeah, if you got 10 cars in your household, one thing is for sure, you can't drive them all at once. So basically, that is what we do. As mentioned, I created the company. I've been operating for close to 5 years now. Prior to that, I lived in Denmark. I cheated a bit because I, 20 years ago, used to live in New Zealand, been back and forth quite a few times. Not a very sustainable way of living. So 5 years ago, I moved to New Zealand. Have only been on a plane once and not back to Europe. So I'm a full-time Kiwi now. Back in Denmark, my background was transportation and rentals as well, both traditional car rentals, car sharing, and also peer-to-peer car sharing. So that was a little bit about me and at MyCarYourRental. We had a challenge here, as you mentioned, Phil, that we got a lot of cars sitting around New Zealand. Most of them are used in average 1 hour per day. So it's very, very little time. They're basically just sitting around in car parks, in driveways, on fields, look out the window. They're all over the place. 1 hour per day being used, 23 hours not being used. That's a challenge we must somehow be able to address and solve in a lot better way. To compare it to a staff member, a car is an asset like anything else in your business. Staff member is an asset. I know it's pretty hard to put up for sale as such if you don't use it. But at least if you compare the car to a staff member, how would you feel if the staff member only worked 5% of the time or 20 minutes of the day? You probably wanted to find some sort of solution to either increase the amount of work being done by that staff member, or think differently in terms of maybe hiring a freelancer to do the work. So let's say you run a small business like you. I wouldn't hire an accountant just to sit there 20 minutes a day to do my books. I simply work with somebody on a freelance basis. And car sharing is very much the same way of thinking. You need to basically make use of what you got the best possible way to get a return on the investment, or you need to think differently. Maybe you shouldn't invest in that sort of asset if you're not gonna use it most of the time. And again, as Phil mentioned, what do we do to increase the mobility? What I mean by that is we constantly need to move more and more around if we not take into consideration the lockdown period here and the way things are maybe changing. But over time, I'm pretty confident as well, we'll start to move more and more around. And how do we do that without just keep on adding vehicles to our roads? Basically, we are working on a solution where you are the solution to that. With a little help from us, as I like to say. You need to consider a different approach to the car ownership. As mentioned before, if you operate a company or even as a private person, let's say on a private side that you have a 4-wheel drive with a tow bar because you got a boat, that's great. I have a boat as well. But do you really need that 4-wheel drive standing around in the driveway 24 hours a day just to tow the boat in and out of the water? What if you could just walk 50 meters down the road and borrow your neighbor's car in a safe and secure setup? That would, both from an investment point of view and from a usage point of view, make a lot more sense instead of just having that car sitting there costing you a fortune for certificate of fitness, a warrant of fitness, and insurance, and what else you need to have on there. So, so with a little bit of help of you, from you and think differently, we can reduce that car ownership even further. we see examples at the moment around town where apartments are being built that is basically based around not having car ownership at all. And the whole model here is that you use a shared car, whether it's a business to consumer as Cityhop, or it's a consumer to consumer as MyCarYourRental, whenever you need transportation. If you don't need it, there's no reason to have a car sitting around. And then you might say that you have a car sitting around. It's a 1992 Toyota Corolla. Nobody wants to rent that. Or you might say, oh, I'm driving a Tesla. Nobody can afford to rent that. The truth is that anything basically can be shared through a site like MyCarYourRental. We get heaps of rentals for both the Tesla and the Toyota Corolla. And it all depends on, as long as the price and the product matches, then we can rent it out. And on the other hand, doesn't matter how low or how value your vehicle has, then you can basically make an income from it. The impact, if you start to share your car, or at least live in a car-free environment, is that every time a car is shared, overseas studies shows that we take 15 cars off the road. I would probably question, I haven't been able to find any New Zealand study around that. Maybe my colleague Cityhop can put some light around that question, what the actual number is in New Zealand. But overseas, 15 cars go off the road every time we can get somebody to use a shared car. So that is quite a lot. Other impact of sharing is that you make a big difference for the individual Kiwi. So let's say you have got rid of your car and you rent a privately owned car, then you support that private or a small business owner-operated business by renting their car when they don't need it. In average, car owners that are active at our site, accepting bookings and so on, make about $2,500 per car a year. So it's not a bad additional income compared to just having that car sitting in your driveway. Finally, you might get, by using MyCarYourRental, you might get other customers if you're running a business that you had no idea that you will actually get. Good example is we have a couple of immigration consultants listing their vehicles at the site. Last summer, a tourist rented a car through the platform, and that was the owner of the immigration advice company. And she actually ended up getting a customer out of that because that person was interested in getting a work visa here and went through her with the application. So there's all sort of side benefits of meeting real people in real life. At MyCarYourRental, you meet up with the owner and the renter in person. So you make that private and personal connection as well.
Great, thanks, Henrik. Do you mind if we've got quite a few questions coming in, so maybe if we can switch to those, if that's okay.
That's all right.
Cool. Let's just, if you can unshare your screen. Yeah, thank you very much for the questions that have come in. I should have reminded everyone that there is the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So we have had questions through, so people are finding it, but please add questions. Right, where should we start here? Henrik, you run nationwide.
Yes, we cover all of New Zealand, all the way from north to south. We are very happy to get cars listed even at odd small places. One thing that that you will find with peer-to-peer car sharing, that doesn't matter whether it's our platform or other platforms doing similar things in New Zealand or overseas, is that where people are, you get the most usage of the platform. So as an example, if you're in Christchurch, Wellington, and Auckland, if you're near the city center or near the airport, you will get more traction compared to, like I'm situated in Torbay on the North Shore here in Auckland. And I do get rentals up here, but I have multiple locations for my vehicles listed. I have a few vehicles myself. And I find the biggest interest is near the city center or close to the airport. However, one of the key points is that it's convenience. So if you have that car listed in the outskirts of Tauranga or whatever, you will find that you will get rentals. And the more, if you got a car at those places where there's not really all that many listed, you are much more likely to get the rental there, obvious, because there's no other choice.
Sure. Yeah. In terms of the financial side, how is the pricing determined?
We are very user-driven site and concept. So basically, we will advise you around what price you should charge for your car, but it's purely user-driven. So if you have that old Corolla and you decide to list it for $200 a day, you're probably going to get an email from us saying, thanks for listing your Corolla. We probably won't get the $200 a day for it. You're likely not to get any rentals. If that's what you really want to try, give it a go, but we recommend this price. The other way around, if you rent a Tesla out and you say you want $20 a day, I'm probably going to reach out as well and say you can probably get a little bit more. So so it's completely up to the user what they want to charge. However, it needs to be realistic for car rentals.
Let the market decide.
Yes, and that's a very good point, especially right now where there's not so much traction in terms of the rental market all over New Zealand.
How does insurance work? We've had a couple of questions on the insurance side.
Yes, we got insurance through a small New Zealand company called Ando. So basically, when you list your car and rent your car out, as long as you follow the conditions of renting out your car, we've got certain procedures you need to follow there. As long as you do that, it's as an owner, completely covered with no access through Ando. As a renter, you are still covered exactly the same way, but you have an access depending on what you choose during the booking process. So typically standard $1,000, but it can be reduced all the way down to $50 if you meet the criteria. But important to say, you need to follow the T's and C's of the site. So the car, of course, needs to be legal and roadworthy for rentals and all that sort of stuff. You will get a series of email if you signed up of how to do this. It's not rocket science or anything, but you can't just take the ute you had on your lawn for the last 5 years without warning and put it up for rent. That's not going to work.
Sure.
Insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the income for you, the business, is that you take a proportion of the fee? Is that how it works? So quite a simple model there?
That's correct, yeah. So you can say for an owner, no rentals, no pay. Once we get a booking through and it's completed, then we take our share, which is roughly 35% in average to cover insurance, credit card, and all that stuff, coffee for me. And the rest goes directly back to the owner. That number will be impacted on the value of your car, the length of the rental, and a few other factors. So you might find that a short rental will give you less than a long rental and so on.
Cool.
But it's stated quite clearly in any requests you get.
Great. And we just got time for one more question. In terms of, and this is probably COVID related, roughly the percentage of your customers who are tourists, whether you have that information, and the potential effect of the current situation on the business.
Yeah, I'm actually very fortunate because at the moment, and I think that will go for a lot of car rentals, at the moment we are in the low season, no matter what, COVID or not. Obvious reasons right now, 100% of my customers are domestic market, don't have that many tourists. Normally will be about 25% this time of the year. In the high season, it will go all the way up to 65, 70%. However, it is still tourists, but they are our neighbors. So Australians is the way biggest margin of those people. So I have a lot of people, private users mainly, are a little bit worried about renting out to people from Europe. So like a crazy Danish person like myself, because to drive on the opposite side of the road. That is not a major issue. We do get people from Europe driving. We do require international license and all that sort of stuff. But the majority is from Australia and New Zealand. Wonderful.
Thank you, Henrik. Brilliant. Really good to hear more. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.
Cheers. So now quickly pass over to Ben Carter, who is the General Manager of Cityhop have been an SBN member for over 12 years. So welcome to you, Ben. Just need to unmute yourself.
Give it again. Thanks for the intro, Phil, and thanks to Zan and the rest of the SBN team for the chance to shout out. I'm always happy to talk CarShare, so it'll be challenging to stick to 5 minutes, but I'll do my best. To those of you who don't know me, I'm Ben Carter. I'm the General Manager of Cityhop. We've been around for roughly 12 years, and I've been around in some capacity for most of them, and so we're New Zealand's first cars by the hour service. Okay. So the problem that we're all facing is the environmental crisis and the carbon crisis. And one of the main causes of that is overconsumption. One of the main areas of overconsumption that New Zealand excels at is car ownership. As Phil mentioned earlier, car ownership is one of the highest rates in the world in New Zealand. In fact, we are only behind San Marino and Monaco in terms of cars per 1,000 people. So it's not something per capita that we want to be that high up at, but unfortunately we are. With so many cars on New Zealand roads, it's no surprise that we have high transport emissions, high amounts of road trauma, high amounts of congestion, and such resilience to public and active transport infrastructure. So our solution, I'll give a quick introduction to Cityhop. So we're a cars by the hour service, a car share company. We have roughly 200 vehicles around Auckland and Wellington for people to book whenever they need. It's on demand. They simply book online, they unlock with a Cityhop smart card, and they drive away like a normal car. So if you can have a car when you need, and you no longer need to own a car, or you might have 2 cars instead of 3, or 1 car instead of 2. We want people to live a car light lifestyle. When living car light, people walk more, they cycle more, and they catch public transport more. So with more modal shift and less car ownership, there's a range of benefits there, from less congestion, less traffic, less emissions, less road trauma, and healthier cities ultimately. I'm sure we all know of places around Auckland and Wellington where there were rows of car parks, and now they're tables of cafe tables and chairs and benches and trees, which is far nicer and healthier to be by. So as a quick introduction of the impact that CarShare has, or station-based CarShare like Cityhop, it is one of the only tools a city has to reduce car ownership and to increase modal shift. So we have a wealth of research both internationally and locally now, demonstrating the benefits of CarShare. So I've written a story about it on Greater Auckland that has all the sources if people are curious to look further into them. Specifically in Auckland, we've done research with Auckland Transport in 2014 and 2018 into our members and how Cityhop has changed their behaviours. In 2014, 59% of our members had either delayed a purchase of a car, reduced the number of cars they owned, or lived without a car. We had similar results in 2018 with 49% of people who had either delayed a purchase of a car, reduced the amount of cars owned, or lived without a car. But in both studies, we had roughly 20% of our members who lived without a car. Again, with Auckland Transport looking into the changes in active and public transport, after people had joined Cityhop, they walked more, they cycled more, and they caught public transport more. They become multimodal. Once you take the car keys out of your pocket, you're forced to pick different journeys and the most efficient journey for that particular moment. When you're walking more, catching the bus more, and driving less, there's emission savings. So the average Cityhop member saves just under 400 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents every year. Normally at this point in the talk, I would ask everyone to sign up to Cityhop. It's free and you're welcome to give our service a go. But if Cityhop isn't right for you at this moment in time, we're always looking for champions of CarShare, people who can see the benefit that we provide to a city, the benefits that our members provide, and we always need support and similar initiatives to us and cycling, accessible cities, livable cities. They all need support as well, because we don't just want another road. We want, you know, healthy, livable cities with less cars. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Brilliant. We've had some really, if you could, that's great. Unshare your screen, good stuff. We've had some really good questions come through. Let me pick the first one. This is around the location of where your vehicles are. You know, where do you typically have the vehicles in Wellington and Auckland?
We sort of go wherever we can. Predominantly around the CBD, but if you look at our website, we're slowly moving into the suburbs. Where there's high population density is obviously preferred to us, because it lets us get more people into the cars and makes them more viable. But whenever we get people asking for cars, we're listening. So we're always looking for new locations. And
you're having you're kind of making them available in some you know, residential places as well.
Yep. No, we have cars on Waiheke now. We have cars in Hobsonville. We have cars all around the show these days. We're not just in the city centre.
And one's available in that carless apartment block in Auckland somewhere.
Yeah, no, we have Cityhop vehicles in multiple apartment blocks. They're just not open to the general public, so people don't get to see them. But there are we're in just under maybe 5 different apartment blocks with our service.
Cool. In terms of your users, how many are kind of individual users and how many are businesses? You know, to what extent are businesses kind of using CarShare as an opportunity to reduce the size of their own fleets?
We always want more businesses. We are unusual in that regard, in that we're about a 50-50 split between business and individual. Internationally, CarShare is more young 20-year-olds, but we actually have a different membership to that here. We have an older membership than that, and they're actually predominantly female, probably because they're smarter than us males. But
well, that's interesting. Any explanation as to why that difference might be?
I've heard someone from a bus company explain that women are open to transport choices more than men. Stereotypically, men know where they're going and don't ask for directions, whereas women are more open to change. But that's anecdotal. But I think that would probably have some truth to it. Sure.
A couple of questions in relation to the types of vehicles you have. One is about what EVs you have, and also do you provide vans for hire to, say, moving house or something like that?
Yes, we're unique in that respect to car sharing companies, as we have a vehicle for every need. So we have vans, both cargo vans for moving house, 10-seater vans for moving a lot of people around, a range of different EVs. We have cars with dog hammocks if you want to move a pet, or if you have a pet and you don't want to own a car. We try and have a car for every need, really.
Cool. More good questions here. Yeah, this relates to what Henrik was talking about in terms of average vehicle being stationary 95% of the time. You know, do you have any data on what the usage is of your vehicles?
Yep, absolutely. It's something we've been looking at really closely coming out of the level 4 lockdown. We have our cars obviously move more than 5% of the time. The general goal for station-based car share is around the 20% utilization, and so that ranges between. We have cars that are over that, and we have cars that are under that. It sort of depends on the location of the car.
Sure. Are the EVs particularly, are they seeing good demand? Is there, specific demand for EVs?
Yes, I mean, the demand for EVs is limited because we can't provide the most convenient locations because of infrastructure. We're sort of hamstrung to where we can put them. But no, we have a unique type of people that love using our EVs. We have people that will go out of their way to use them, whether that means cycling to them and parking up their bike or catching a train to get to them.
Cool. Have you noticed any difference in terms of, post lockdown? How's demand been maintained?
Similar to the question that Henrik was asked, we are predominantly domestic market. We didn't rely on many tourists. We want repeat customers and repeat members. The biggest difference, we had a bounce back almost immediately as soon as the restrictions were lifted. People relied on us to get their groceries and to do day-to-day activities, so it wasn't too surprising to us. The biggest change was businesses. There were so many businesses that weren't in the city during level 3 and 2, but that's starting to come back now as well. Okay,
cool. This is in relation to the, currently, I think you're mainly an A to A. You hire from a place, or you pick up the car from the place, you have to return it to the same place. Any plans to have a kind of A to B service?
There's a couple of reasons we haven't done so far. In the article that I wrote on the Greater Auckland blog, I go into the details on the benefits between station-based car share and free-floating car share. Free-floating car share replaces public transport and walking and cycling trips, which is not what we want to do. We don't want you to take a car one way instead of catching the bus. We want you to catch the bus or to walk.
Yeah, makes sense. What else have we got here? What's the prospects for car share? What's the experience overseas in terms of growth of car share? And what are your hopes and expectations for your service?
Yeah, a car share overseas has exponentially been growing. It's, if anyone's been to Europe recently, I'm sure they've seen, similar to the scooters, a different color car share company sort of on every corner. New Zealand's been a bit slower to adopt it in many different ways, but that's what we're hoping, really. We're hoping to move to every major city centre in New Zealand and different regions eventually.
Had a question here specifically in relation to availability in Devonport and that peninsula, Belmont, Bayswater, to Ease Lake Road. I'm not sure that would necessarily, so that's a question from the Facebook feed.
Thank you to that person. They would be surprised at how hard we've been trying to get a space at Devonport. It's been years of banging on doors. I'm meeting with another person from Auckland Transport next week, hoping to get a resolution there. It's sort of our number one priority to get close to the ferry terminal.
Excellent. Do you have long-term rental options, or is it only by the hour?
Yep, no, another very good question. We do now. One of the things we changed during lockdown is we introduced a subscription service. So for those who don't want to own a car but might need a car for a week or a month or maybe a bit longer, that we now have an option for people to consider.
Great. All right, Ben, one final question. What would be, what would help you to grow even more? What support could be, could people provide, or could local authorities provide? What would be your one wish?
Well, for more wishes. We absolutely need local authorities to be friendly with us. But in order for that to happen, we need the people to support us as well. So I'd say we need the people to support us when we go up for public consultation or when parking policies are reviewed. We need the public to voice their opinion and to throw support behind car sharing.
Cool. Wonderful. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much, Ben. Really appreciate your time today. And thank you for everybody for joining. We have another shout out event next Tuesday, featuring a couple of members talking about the circular economy again. So that will be a continuing theme for next week. So yeah, just for now, have a good rest of Tuesday and look forward to seeing you at another SBN event very soon. And thanks again for joining us, and to the two presenters joining us. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Okay. Thanks, Phil.